In the stories of Barbados, especially those stories shared with me, orally or as recorded in books, I often didn't see the type of work, particularly the cultural work done by Black Barbadian women, and how they reach back through time and space to an African-centered perspective and a sense of spirituality to do this work. A type of work that exists, but we don't often see. The root work of our society. Through their root work, these women and men use the past to inform the present. Memory, intuition, and spirituality inform their work on healing and preserving an element of Barbados' history and a way of being. Healing Roots seeks to tell a bit of this story. The institution of slavery, colonialization, neocolonialism, and capitalism paint one picture of Barbados. These root workers give us another, a story that lies beautifully between these fields and hills beyond recall. Spanning generations and even nation states, these root workers allow us a glimpse into the past. They situate our present and offer a roadmap to the future. Through their use of roots, plants, and what's generally referred to as bush medicine, we get a glimpse into ancestral knowledge, a knowledge that may defy Eurocentric understandings of our island, Los Barbados.
These slaves were brought across the ocean. They were stripped of their possessions. They just came with their knowledge. They could enslave their bodies, but they could not take away their linguistic and cultural consciousness that they brought with them. And so it came through the languages. And then there was the creative contact between the West African languages and the European languages, whether it was English, French, Dutch, Spanish not so much, because the Spanish had been first and then had been more or less ousted. So the Creoles that were formed through this contact were more English-based, French-based, Dutch-based. And so that is why you have certain similarities in the linguistic patterns, naming patterns of these plants and some of the foods as well. So that is the heritage, that the major heritage is African and of course European. But I think because the Africans in the end outnumbered the colonists, the European colonizers and settlers, you have this all-pervasive African substratum, as we call it linguistically, the background that created the languages and brought the cultural, let's say, retentions in terms of the uses of the plants and the types of foods that were produced and that pervade on to this day.
Roots, herbs, and bushes afforded the Barbadian people invocations for healing, a means of engaging in self-protection for themselves and their communities, and a method of cooling and healing. The use of plants for medicinal purposes allowed Barbadian people to continue their relationship between the physical and spiritual worlds.
My name is Ross Isles, or Orlando Mills, officially. I'm a spiritual healer. Also, I'm an indigenous artist. I work with a lot of the materials that I heal with. From 14 going 15, I was living Rastafari, a real Rasta man, right? And most of my life I spent in the cave. So you can understand who I am. Not hiding, but I was there seeking and finding out more about myself and my inner self and plants. So I spent about 3 years in the galleys of Barbados studying plants. But I consider I to be a madman, so when you see me, that's the way it is now today. When nobody to see me, we would call him Basti Rastaman, walking with a staff, right? But that was just the outer side, right? To keep people off of me, you see? But the real spirituality was going on in another world. So that world now is what brought me here now, to educate people. Because I tell myself that I got to come back out here to people and share knowledge. So then I come back out and I start dealing with schools, little projects, and that's how I pick up the speed. And then I start getting awards. I never earned these things in school, you know. I only earned these things as Rasta. And then I was able to travel to South America then to represent Barbados in the same bush medicine and put Barbados on the map.
It is in this root work that we are able to see another story of Barbados.
Historically, we know that women have been forced into the role of healer. The very first few moments of birth of a child, a woman is forced into thinking no longer about herself, but how can she care for that child, get it to survive, and get it to experience a life that she wishes for that child. So we've been forced into being creative in terms of healing. And if we go way back, what would have been our resource in terms of looking for healing for our children? And that would have been our plant resource. It would have been our plant resource and also niggling in our ears the stories that we've been told from our mothers and our fathers. And that would have provided us with the impetus to go heal those fevers, colds and flu, have them thrive, give them tonics. I recently had a beautiful conversation with a centenarian, 105 years old, who at 9 years old started to work in the plantations, and she was able to raise 12 children based on her knowledge that she would have gained from mother, father, auntie, you know, all of those on whose shoulders she stood. And her daughters would tell me that their mom would leave home at times and come back with a basket of plants. And those plants would be used for them as tonics, for them to sleep well at night, their colds and flus, their fevers, everything. And she had a storehouse of knowledge. She knew what plants to use, how to use them, whether to use 3 leaves, 5 leaves. And it's within that background, we have always had to be healers.
Memories. Memories of mothers, of grandmothers, of foremothers. Memories of Africa. Memories of Mother Earth are held dearly in the bushes we use to heal and to provide solace, that place of respite.
So my father, mother raised me, right? So she taught me her knowledge that was passed on from her grandfather to her. When I was small, she used to send me for herbs. Other old people, that's how I get knowledgeable of the herbs. Going for them, she would tell me go by Millie and tell she send some Cersei or send a little bit of thing from behind the PLN. Right, so I would come back home and on the weekend now, when I come from school now, she would normally make these teas on weekends, right? After to detox you, you know. So you would normally get a bath. You would normally get the teas on Saturdays, and you would get the bath on Sundays, which would be a bush bath, right?
In terms of something that we call lemongrass, which is also called fever grass, which I myself was given as a child because I used to have, in Guyana, there was still malaria when I was growing up, and I did have a very bad attack of malaria fever. And I remember my mother giving me this beautiful, fragrant lemongrass tea.
So my mother always seemed to have a remedy. I believe that God directed her. She didn't really teach me per se. She did it, and I observed. When someone was ill, she would say, well, you should do so-and-so, you should use so-and-so. And many people sometimes came to her and asked her about what they could use, you know, for colds and so. Perhaps children had colds or so, and they would always come and ask Miss Scriver, this child has a cold and I don't know what to do. And sometimes there was no money to take them to the doctor. Sometimes she would say, okay, take some coconut oil and some nutmeg and warm it and gave to the child. And very often, the child recovered. She seemed to just know what to do.
And
Tell us a little bit more about the bush bath.
yes.
What's involved in the bush bath?
The bush bath now will be a tub now coming inside the house and some crocus bags spreading on the floor. And this tub getting full of water, boiling on the stove, cold water in the tub, and adding this hot water that boil with these herbs like Christmas bush, whitehead bush, and not only herbs, oils too, right? Of course, you will buy oils like lavender oil, rosemary oil, some other oils to add to the water, right? And then you will have this bush bath. Then that water now, that left back, should be taken and scrub the floor.
My mother used to parch the oil seed. You know oil tree? You know oil tree? You just pass some coming out. You know castor oil?
Yeah.
They say when you oil come from oil tree. If we feel sick in the night or anything, she get up and she ain't got none ready. She get up and she parch it. And she boil it. And give us a good dose.
Root workers in current times do the same thing for us at an individual level and also at a communal level.
Well, the old people always say to drink cooling tea.
So tell me about cooling tea.
Cooling tea, like when we getting in a certain age, they say the menopause and all the hot flashes, cool down the blood, cool down the vibes with drinking soursop bush, little pear leaf, a little guava leaf. You know, that's what the old people is always say, drink your cooling teas. And I find this work. You know, like herbs, you always say herbs is the healing of the nation. And what does that mean? And well, it is a completely different kettle of fish. Because when you look at herbs, you're dealing with healing, right? You're dealing with a homegrown remedy. Looking at bush medicine and the therapy, the aroma, you know, how it stimulates and titillates the senses. And how does that work in a real magical way to heal you without you seeing it with the naked eye. So then it's just, you gotta know, say that you gotta trust though. Trust and obey, there's no other way. But then it's like the volumes and the portions. And what people like to say, go to the spirit and let the spirit teach you. And that is some of the issues as it relates to our heritage and knowledge being passed on.
I see my role in paying homage to my ancestors, like my grandmother and the other great ancestors that passed on. I pay homage in my works every day and the way that I live. Just to protect it, you know what I mean? So it's no more than that, just living it. You have to continue to live the life, right?
Do you believe this is your purpose?
Yeah, it's a purpose, because it's a way of life. And if you neglect that purpose, you can feel the pain out here, right? So that's why the people feeling the pain, because they neglect the ancestors, right?
In thinking about their use of root work, there is often a reference to Africa and the connections that continue to this day. And this is what these root workers do. They allow us to see how this history of Africa is preserved in this land through their living. And in their living, they bring to the forefront that tension that exists in Barbados. They speak to what is lost as Barbados and Barbadians advance in the midst of global capitalism. These advances often shift the physical and cultural landscapes, but even more, They shine the spotlight on how we tend to leave some things, the knowledge that is transferred intergenerationally, like the stories told by our grandmothers, behind. Bush workers ask us to confront this vital question. What's being lost in Lost Barbados?
Out there, a lot of the community lost the values, you see, of these things, especially Barbados, right? It'd be very strange in Barbados. I know for a fact because I work with real students. I work in a lot of projects in Barbados for years, and they are completely lost. Lost Barbados, you know, completely lost, like 4 generations down, lost a lot of the knowledge. There are more domestic people now, right? So a lot of the youths will be interested and to find out about these things, you know, because it'd be like a new adventure for the youths, right? But like the elder people now, they're just like done with that, and we will kick that away, right? We want the new things, right? You understand? So that's really the problem. But we gotta keep working on it, right? Yeah.
The misfortune is that as modernization and development progressed, a lot of these things were disappeared, and the knowledge of the usage was lost, the names were lost, and that is part of my remit because we are trying to preserve the naming system and to preserve the names of these plants. But things like, say, building development and clearing of you know, lots of land to make new buildings, to build houses, factories, etc., etc., created a certain lack and a certain dearth of things, and so some of the knowledge and some of the plants themselves have disappeared because of that type of the progress and the process of modernization.
I learned to use the plants and herbs from my mom and some from my dad. Unfortunately, I've forgotten a lot of them. I haven't moved away from the source because there were a lot of them in Hillaby and in St. Thomas. So I haven't moved away. We don't have as many as we used to, but they use a lot of herbs for tea, bush tea, and various things like that. Cooling tea, swellings, colds.
It is the result, I do believe, of our people being fragmented and disconnected. That fragmentation meant that all of the beautiful stories and narratives were not passed on. And if you don't have that foundation, that beauty, that value permeating within the family, then we lose the knowledge and it can disappear. We did a study around 2007 where we checked in on 8 of the 11 parishes on the island, looking to find out what vestiges of this knowledge were still alive and who had that knowledge. And what it showed us that the knowledge was leaking, if you want to put it that way. And there was only about 45% of that population that we interviewed had some idea about using plants for medicine, but it was very limited. They'll be able to tell you, most of them, about the use of 1 or 2 plants. And the population maybe that was still heavily invested was about only 10%. And then when we look closer at our data, we found out that the custodians of this knowledge invariably was a woman. It was a woman who was in her 60s. And because we're losing our older population without this knowledge being transferred, it was like a bell ringing for me. Something has to be done to stop this leakage.
Unfortunately, I think that a lot of this knowledge is being lost because women nowadays, they don't worry about Cersei for colds, they don't worry about these other things, they just ignore them and they go to the clinics and they use the medications that are prescribed. But I still think that if we could go back to some of these older remedies, they would be good, they would work, and they would be less costly.
In Barbados, I believe turning back to tropical, because the white name overseas, tropical plants. But they don't like it now like how we used to have it, because there's factory now that manufacturing it, and they're putting it in little bags, like tea bags. So the more rather to go and buy that and use it, then I come and selling them a bunch of bush for 25 cents. But in those days gone by, when life is sweet and couldn't be sweeter, I get up this morning, had my sugar, I go down the gully, down the riverside, and pick, and get a bag full and go down to town next morning. Bush, who call him bush? You ain't getting on steady, the first one cheap penny. So I had in between now, you had to get back another penny 4 cents. You follow? Good.
I learned most of the local herbs from Raphael, St. John, and mostly from just wanting and seeking to know about herbs, because that is the line that I want to get in, also natural healing and herbal medicine. I think that young people, I don't know, fear herbs and fear eating healthy because of a certain, I don't know, modern influence. I plan on passing on the knowledge that I learned from others, but first my journey has to start with me, and I have to heal myself and get to know myself a little bit more. No, actually it's a continuous journey.
Root workers weave together the past and present in the same way basket makers in Barbados, Charleston, South Carolina, and Ghana weave together couscous grass and bread and cheese vine to make their baskets. Root workers take the strands, moving to a rhythm of the earth and the calling of the ancestors to help us heal, but more importantly, to create a tapestry of cultures that allows us to rest and to come to fully know ourselves.
The message is to utilize the natural things around you. Learn about them, inquire, research, seek knowledge. That's what we say, ask for wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, so that we can continue to develop, different types of products, different types of, healing balms, to assist our people. And it's very, very, especially in the age with so many sickness, and all the different viruses and stuff that, is coming upon human. It's very important to learn what is around you and what can work and what can benefit you and what can help to heal your body. And we need to really do more programs in healing and recognizing and learning the different types of plants and herbs and the medicinal properties. And I would say that is very important, whether it's through BCC or other. And Dr. Sonia Peters, she has been, I've heard about her a long time doing a lot of work. You have Brother Ayels, you have Mr. Maynard, just up the road in Turnesol. There's still, Chantel in Pelican Village. There's still a lot of different individuals who are out there still trying to promote the use of herbs and natural healing. So my message is to try for us to garner and gather the information and the knowledge and pass it on to the youth. Encourage the youth, even students.
I think it's important for all of our people to understand our value One of my problems is that we keep looking external to Barbados, external to the Caribbean for solutions and answers, and that's not going to work. That's not sustainable because you're sitting waiting on someone to feed you information. So my plea to the Caribbean is to understand the value of our people, understand the value of our women, our men, and I'm saying that we have got to be a little more keen in picking up on what helped us to survive to where we are, but it's all in valuing each other. I mean, I can't even find the words, you know, to magnify that to where it has to be, but we understand that that is basic, that is the foundation. Our mothers knew that we had to feed our children, we know about that, and therefore the Caribbean needs to draw on all of its traditional knowledge and look to feed itself with our natural resource.
These root workers are calling us to come back to self, to go to the interior, so that we may craft a future that doesn't cause us to forget that these fields and hills are now our very own. Root workers remind us that these indigenous and local plants and the work that they do are all part of we culture. As we continue to move towards a more modern and developed society, how will we preserve this knowledge?
Mini root, gully root, St. John bush, and even the bread and cheese root can use. You know bread and cheese?
No, tell me about bread and cheese.
It right name is St. John bush. Right?
What do you do with it? You boil it, or what do you do with it?
That's what I the come follow me. It make perfume. It make perfume with it. Come follow me.
Come follow me? So tell me, you ever use come follow me?
What?
No?
You said God give you a beautiful face. God give you a beautiful face. I had to make nobody follow me.